I rushed home when I got the emergency call. What I saw made me sick. Karen, the neighborhood boss, was grabbing my 8-year-old blind daughter Emma. My little girl was crying and scared. This evil woman was hurting my baby. She had no idea she just attacked the sheriff's child. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The screech of tires on asphalt shattered the peaceful morning as I pulled into my driveway, my heart already racing from the frantic 911 call. What I saw made my blood freeze in my veins. Karen Morrison, our neighborhood's self-appointed HOA dictator, had my 8-year-old daughter Emma pinned against our mailbox, her manicured claws digging into my little girl's shoulders. Emma's face was streaked with tears, her small body trembling with terror as she clutched her white cane like a lifeline. Buddy, her golden retriever service dog, was circling them frantically, his protective instincts warring with his training not to attack. "Get your hands off my daughter!" I roared, slamming my patrol car door so hard the windows rattled. Karen's head snapped toward me, her perfectly styled blonde hair whipping around her face. About time someone showed up. This little brat and her mutt have been violating HOA regulations for the last time. "Daddy?" Emma's voice cracked with relief and fear. She grabbed me. I was just trying to get our mail. I was already moving, my hand instinctively reaching for my weapon before I forced myself to stop. This woman was terrorizing my blind daughter, my baby who had never hurt a soul in her 8 years of life. The morning had started so differently. Emma and I had been having breakfast together, just like every day since her mother died 2 years ago in that terrible car accident. Emma had been excited about showing me a new Braille book she'd mastered, her fingers dancing across the raised dots with remarkable speed and precision. "Daddy, did you know that Louis Braille was only 15 when he invented this system?" she'd asked, her face glowing with enthusiasm. "No, sweetheart, I didn't know that. He was blind too, just like me. But he didn't let that stop him from helping other people." That conversation felt like a lifetime ago as I faced the nightmare unfolding before me. "Ma'am, you need to step away from the child immediately," I commanded, my sheriff's training kicking in even as my father's heart screamed for vengeance. "I don't think so, officer," Karen sneered, not recognizing the authority in my voice. "This child has been letting her dog defecate all over our pristine neighborhood. She's been trespassing on common property, and that animal is clearly aggressive and uncontrolled." Every word was a lie and we both knew it. Buddy was a perfectly trained service dog, certified through years of rigorous training at the Regional Service Dog Center. The certification process alone had taken 18 months and cost nearly $25,000, but seeing the bond between Emma and Buddy had made every penny worth it. He'd never had an accident outside our property, never shown aggression toward anyone. His training was so thorough that he could guide Emma through crowded areas, alert her to obstacles, and even help her navigate complex public transportation systems. But Karen Morrison had made our lives hell for 6 months with her constant harassment, her petty complaints, her obvious disgust at having a disabled child in her perfect neighborhood. It had started the very first week we moved in, when she'd knocked on our door with a stack of HOA regulations and a disapproving frown. "I hope you understand that this is a family-oriented community with high standards," she'd said, her eyes lingering on Emma's white cane with barely concealed distaste. "We expect all residents to maintain the aesthetic integrity of the neighborhood." I'd been polite then, hopeful that we could build a good relationship with our neighbors. How naive I'd been. "The dog is a registered service animal," I said through gritted teeth, pulling out my badge. "And I'm Sheriff Michael Stevens. You're currently committing assault on a minor." The color drained from Karen's face like water from a broken dam. Her grip on Emma loosened slightly, but she didn't let go. Her mind was clearly racing, trying to process this new information and figure out how to salvage the situation. You're the sheriff?" she stammered. "Yes. And you've been harassing my family for 6 months. Today you've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." The history of Karen's harassment flashed through my mind. The formal complaint she'd filed about Emma's excessive noise, when my daughter had been practicing piano. The threatening letter about Buddy's presence in our front yard. The time she'd called animal control claiming Buddy was running loose, when he'd been securely on his leash, helping Emma navigate to our car. "I had no idea," she began, but I cut her off. "It wouldn't have mattered if I was a garbage collector or a billionaire. You're physically restraining a blind child who was doing nothing wrong." Emma's sobs grew louder. "Daddy, she said Buddy was bad. She said I was bad. She said we don't belong here." Those words hit me like a physical blow. My daughter, this brave, beautiful little girl who faced every day with such courage despite losing her sight at birth, had been told she didn't belong in her own neighborhood. Emma had been born with Leber congenital amaurosis, a rare genetic condition that caused severe vision loss from birth. But she'd never let her blindness define her limitations. She could read Braille faster than most people could read print. She played piano beautifully, her enhanced hearing allowing her to detect subtle nuances in music that sighted people often missed. She navigated our house and neighborhood with confidence and grace. "Emma, sweetheart, look at me," I said gently, kneeling down to her level while keeping my eyes on Karen. "You belong everywhere you want to be. You're perfect exactly as you are." But she said. She was wrong. Very, very wrong. Karen's face had gone from pale to red with fury. "Now listen here, I don't care if you're the sheriff or the president. This neighborhood has standards, and that includes not having dangerous animals running around unleashed. Buddy is always under Emma's control," I said, my patience evaporating. "He's never been unleashed, never been aggressive, and never caused any problems. The only dangerous thing in this neighborhood is you. How dare you?" Karen shrieked, her voice carrying across the street and drawing neighbors to their windows. "I've been protecting this community for 3 years. Property values have increased 12% under my leadership. Property values don't matter when you're terrorizing children. I'm not terrorizing anyone. I'm enforcing community standards that everyone agreed to when they moved here. Show me the HOA rule that prohibits service animals." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. There was no such rule, of course. The Americans with Disabilities Act made such rules illegal, but Karen had been operating under the assumption that no one would challenge her authority. She'd built her little kingdom on intimidation and the fear of legal fees that most residents couldn't afford. The general pet policy," she began weakly, "doesn't apply to service animals, and you know it." By now, several neighbors had emerged from their houses. Mrs. Patterson from next door was hurrying over, her face creased with worry. The Johnson family from across the street stood on their porch, their teenage son filming everything with his phone. I could see curtains twitching and windows up and down the block as residents peered out to see what was causing the commotion. Mrs. Patterson had been our saving grace since we moved in. A retired teacher in her 70s, she'd immediately taken Emma under her wing, teaching her about the different plants in the neighborhood and helping her memorize the layout of our street. She'd even learned basic Braille to help Emma with homework when I was working late shifts. "Emma, honey, are you okay?" Mrs. Patterson called out, her voice gentle and concerned. "She grabbed me, Mrs. Patterson," Emma said, her voice small and scared. "I was just getting our mail like Daddy taught me, but she said I was trespassing." "Our mailbox is on our property," I said firmly. "Emma has every right to be there." "Property lines are clearly marked," Karen insisted, but there was less conviction in her voice now. She was clearly past the boundary. "Our mailbox is 6 feet from the sidewalk," I said. "It's been surveyed twice. Emma was nowhere near your property or any common area." The truth was becoming clear to everyone watching. Karen Morrison had fabricated a reason to physically assault my daughter because she couldn't stand the sight of a disabled child in her precious neighborhood. The property survey had been done when we purchased the house, and again 3 months ago when Karen first started making complaints about boundary violations. "I'm calling the police," Karen announced, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. "I am the police," I reminded her. "And you're about to add filing a false report to your charges." "What charges?" she demanded, but her voice cracked. "Assault on a minor, unlawful restraint, harassment, and violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act." Karen's face went white again. "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. I have immunity." "HOA presidents don't have immunity from criminal law," I said, reaching for my handcuffs. "Karen Morrison, you're under arrest." "This is insane," she screamed, finally releasing Emma, who immediately ran to my arms. "I was protecting the neighborhood. That dog could attack someone." "Buddy has never shown aggression toward anyone," I said, holding Emma tightly while she sobbed against my chest. "He's been certified by 3 different organizations. The only one showing aggression here is you." As I held Emma, I could feel her small body shaking with fear and confusion. This was supposed to be a safe place for her, a neighborhood where she could practice her independence and build confidence. Instead, Karen had turned it into a battlefield. "I want my lawyer," Karen demanded as I cuffed her hands behind her back. "You'll get your phone call at the station," I said. "Right now, you're going to jail for assaulting my daughter." The handcuffs clicked into place with a satisfying sound. Karen Morrison, who had terrorized my family and countless others with her petty tyranny, was finally being held accountable for her actions. But even as I arrested her, I knew this was just the beginning. The trauma Emma had endured, the months of harassment we'd suffered, those wounds would take much longer to heal than any legal process. As I led Karen to my patrol car, neighbors began gathering on the street. Mrs. Patterson was kneeling beside Emma, offering comfort and kind words. Mr. Chin from down the block was shaking his head in disgust. Even families I'd barely spoken to were emerging from their houses, drawn by the commotion. Sheriff Stevens, called out Janet Riley, a single mother who lived 3 houses down. "I'm so sorry this happened to Emma." Janet was raising 2 young children on her own after her husband's deployment overseas turned permanent when he was killed in action. She worked double shifts as a nurse to make ends meet, and I'd always admired her strength and dedication. "Thank you, Janet. We've all been wanting to complain about Karen's behavior for months," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "She's made life miserable for half the neighborhood." "Why didn't anyone speak up?" I asked. "Who were we supposed to call?" asked Mr. Chin. "We didn't know you were law enforcement." Karen made it seem like she had all the power, like she could fine us or force us to move. Mr. Chin was a retired engineer who'd moved to the neighborhood with his wife after their children grew up. They were quiet, respectful people who kept a beautiful garden and always waved when they saw Emma and me walking by. "She threatened to put a lien on my house over my garden gnomes," added Mrs. Patterson. "Said they violated the aesthetic standards. She made my kids scrub chalk drawings off our own driveway," Janet said angrily. "Told them they were defacing community property, even though it was our own concrete. She actually measured the height of my grass with a ruler," Mr. Chen added. "Claimed it was a 1/4 inch too tall." As I listened to these stories, a picture emerged of systematic bullying and harassment. Karen Morrison had been operating like a petty dictator, using her position to intimidate and control her neighbors. She'd weaponized the HOA rules, creating an atmosphere of fear where residents were afraid to live normal lives in their own homes. "I want to file a complaint," Janet said firmly. "She's been terrorizing my family for 2 years." "Me too," added Mr. Chin. "And me," said Mrs. Patterson. "What she did to Emma today was unforgivable, but it's not the first time she's been cruel to that sweet little girl." My heart clenched. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Patterson's eyes filled with tears. "She once yelled at Emma for letting Buddy sniff a tree on the parkway. Called it property damage. That poor baby was so confused, she didn't understand what she'd done wrong. The memory of that day came flooding back. Emma had come home unusually quiet, and when I'd asked about her walk, she'd simply said it was fine. I'd been dealing with a particularly difficult case at work and hadn't pressed for details. Now I realized I'd failed to protect my daughter when she needed me most. She blocked Emma's path with her car last month," Janet added. "Claimed the sidewalk was for productive residents only. I watched Emma and Buddy have to walk in the street to get around her." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice barely controlled. "Emma made us promise not to worry you," Mrs. Patterson said gently. "She said you were already sad about her mommy, and she didn't want to make you sadder with her little problems." The words hit me like a physical blow. My brave little girl had been protecting me from Karen's cruelty, suffering in silence so I wouldn't worry. Emma had always been sensitive to my emotions, especially after her mother's death. She'd somehow sensed that I was struggling with grief and single parenthood, and had decided to shoulder this burden alone rather than add to my stress. "There's more," said a new voice. I turned to see David Kim, a quiet man who lived at the end of the block. "She's been taking pictures of Emma and Buddy. Said she was documenting violations, but it felt wrong." David was Mr. Chen's nephew, a software engineer who worked from home and often sat on his front porch during breaks. He was usually too shy to speak up in group conversations, so his willingness to come forward spoke volumes about how disturbed he was by Karen's behavior. "Pictures?" I asked, my cop instincts flaring. "Yeah, she had this whole folder on her phone. Pictures of Emma walking to school, playing in your yard, Buddy doing his business in your designated area. She was obsessed. That was stalking. Harassment. Possibly worse. The idea that Karen had been photographing my daughter without my knowledge or consent made my blood boil. Those photos could have been shared with anyone, posted online, or used for purposes I didn't want to contemplate. "I need statements from all of you," I said. "This goes way beyond what happened today." "Whatever you need," Janet said firmly. "We should have spoken up sooner. We failed Emma." "No," I said, looking at my daughter, who was now sitting on Mrs. Patterson's porch with Buddy pressed against her side. "The only person who failed here is Karen Morrison. And she's going to pay for every single thing she's done. As I drove Karen to the station, she alternated between threats and attempts at manipulation. The 20-minute drive felt like an eternity as she tried every tactic she could think of to escape the consequences of her actions. "You know this won't stick," she said from the back seat. "I'll claim I was protecting the neighborhood from a dangerous animal. There's video footage from 3 different doorbell cameras," I replied, "including the one that shows you stalking my daughter for weeks." "Stalking?" "I was documenting violations. Taking pictures of a minor without parental consent, following her daily routines, blocking her path. That's stalking, Karen. And that's just the beginning." Her silence told me she was finally understanding the severity of her situation. But then she tried a different approach. "Look, Sheriff, maybe we can work something out. I'm sure you understand that property values are important to everyone in the neighborhood. That includes you. Are you trying to bribe me?" "Of course not. I'm just saying that maybe we can find a compromise that works for everyone. The only compromise I'm interested in is whether you plead guilty or go to trial." "You're making a mistake. I have connections in this town. The mayor is a personal friend. The mayor is also my golfing partner. I don't think your friendship will survive this." Karen finally fell silent, perhaps realizing that her reign of terror was truly over. At the station, my deputies were waiting. Word had already spread through the department, and the atmosphere was tense. Every cop in the building knew I was a single father raising a disabled daughter. They also knew that anyone who hurt Emma would face their collective wrath. "Sheriff," said Deputy Martinez, "we've got the paperwork ready. Also, District Attorney Williams called. She wants to personally prosecute this case." Deputy Martinez was one of my most trusted officers, a 20-year veteran with a daughter of his own who had autism. He understood the challenges facing families with disabled children and had always been supportive of Emma and me. "Good. What about the other complaints?" 6 neighbors have already called in. We're looking at a pattern of harassment going back 3 years. 3 years? Yeah. Apparently, Karen's been documenting everything she does. We found a whole filing system in her house. Complaints, photos, even recordings of confrontations with neighbors. She's been building cases against half the neighborhood. Cases for what? Forced removal from the community. She's been trying to get people evicted from their own homes over petty HOA violations. The scope of Karen's campaign was staggering. She hadn't just been harassing Emma, she'd been systematically targeting anyone who didn't meet her standards of a perfect neighborhood. Elderly couples who couldn't maintain their yards to her specifications. Young families whose children played too loudly. Anyone who was different, vulnerable, or unable to fight back. "There's something else," Martinez said quietly. "We found a file labeled Problem Families. Emma's photo is in there, along with detailed notes about her unsuitability for community living." I felt my hands clench into fists. What kind of notes? Speculation about her mental capacity, suggestions that blind children should be in specialized facilities, arguments about property values being affected by visible disabilities. She wrote that down? It's all documented. She's been building a case to have your family removed from the neighborhood. The full scope of Karen's hatred was becoming clear. This wasn't just about HOA rules or property values. This was about her fundamental belief that people like Emma didn't belong in her world. She turned discrimination into a systematic campaign, documenting every interaction to build a case for excluding disabled residents from the community. "Sir?" Martinez said carefully. "There's one more thing. We found correspondence with a lawyer about legal options for removing undesirable residents." "What kind of legal options?" "Trumped-up HOA violations, nuisance claims, even suggestions about reporting Emma to Child Protective Services." The room went silent. The idea that Karen had considered calling CPS on me, trying to have Emma removed from my care, was beyond evil. It was a level of calculated cruelty that defied comprehension. "Book her on every charge we can think of," I said quietly. "And I want a full investigation into her HOA activities. If she's been targeting other families, I want to know about it." "Already on it, sir." As the investigation unfolded over the following days, the true extent of Karen's reign of terror became clear. She'd forced 3 families to move over fabricated violations. She'd cost the elderly Kowalskis thousands in unnecessary landscaping fees. She'd made teenage Sarah Martinez's life hell over her inappropriate clothing choices, clothing that consisted of normal teenage attire that Karen deemed unsuitable for her family-oriented community. The Kowalski story was particularly heartbreaking. They were both in their 80s, living on a fixed income, when Karen decided their flower garden didn't meet her aesthetic standards. She'd fine them repeatedly for unauthorized plantings, and force them to hire expensive landscapers to replace their beautiful, carefully tended flowers with approved shrubs. "We spent our life savings on those modifications," Mrs. Kowalski told me with tears in her eyes. "We love this neighborhood, but we almost had to sell our home because of her demands." But her treatment of Emma was the most disturbing. The files showed months of planning, documenting, and escalating harassment. Photos taken from her car window. Notes about Emma's daily routines. Even research into legal ways to have service dogs removed from communities. "She's been planning this for months," DA Williams told me during a meeting in her office. "This wasn't a spontaneous incident. It was a calculated assault on a disabled child." DA Williams was a tough prosecutor who'd made her career fighting for victims' rights. She'd personally prosecuted several high-profile disability discrimination cases and had zero tolerance for anyone who targeted vulnerable populations. "What are we looking at for charges?" "Assault on a minor, unlawful restraint, stalking, harassment, civil rights violations, filing false reports, and conspiracy to violate the Americans with Disabilities Act. If we can prove she was working with that lawyer to target other families, we might add racketeering charges." How long could she get? With the federal civil rights violations? 10 to 15 years. Good. "Mike," Williams said gently, "how's Emma handling all this?" That was the question I'd been dreading. Emma had been quiet since the incident, clinging to Buddy more than usual, asking fewer questions about the world around her. The bright, curious child who'd bounced back from every setback was struggling with the reality that someone could hate her so much. "She's scared," I admitted. "She keeps asking if Karen is going to come back." "Has she said anything else about the harassment?" "That's the worst part. She's been dealing with this for months without telling me. She thought it was her fault somehow." Emma had always been resilient, facing her blindness with a positive attitude that inspired everyone around her. But Karen's systematic campaign of hatred had shaken her confidence in ways that broke my heart. She'd started questioning whether she really belonged in mainstream society, whether her presence was a burden on others. William's expression hardened. "We're going to make sure Karen Morrison never hurts another child." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following week, but Karen's high-powered lawyer was already making noise about a plea deal. The evidence was overwhelming: video footage, photographic documentation, witness statements from 6 neighbors, and Karen's own obsessive filing system. "She wants to plead to simple assault," Karen's lawyer told me privately. "Community service, anger management classes, maybe 6 months probation." The lawyer was a slick corporate attorney who specialized in helping wealthy clients avoid consequences for their actions. He'd represented several other HOA presidents in discrimination cases, usually managing to get them reduced sentences or civil settlements that allowed them to continue their behavior. "Absolutely not," I replied. "She stalked and assaulted a disabled child. She terrorized an entire neighborhood. She doesn't get to walk away with a slap on the wrist." My client was overzealous in her HOA duties, but she never intended to hurt anyone. She documented her plans to have my daughter removed from the community. She researched ways to have Emma taken from my custody. This was premeditated. The lawyer's confidence wavered. "Perhaps we could discuss a more reasonable plea. The only thing we're discussing is how long Karen Morrison spends in prison." As word of the case spread through the community, support for Emma and our family grew. The local disability rights organization offered legal assistance. The Regional Service Dog Training Center volunteered to testify about Buddy certification and training. Even strangers began reaching out with offers of help and support. The disability rights organization sent their best advocate, Maria Santos, a fierce attorney who'd been fighting discrimination cases for 20 years. She'd grown up with a blind sister and understood the challenges our family faced. "This case is about more than just Emma," Maria told me during our first meeting. "It's about establishing that disabled children have the right to live normal lives in mainstream communities without fear of harassment." But the most meaningful support came from our neighbors. The same people who'd been intimidated by Karen's bullying were now standing up for Emma with fierce determination. "That little girl is a treasure," Mrs. Patterson told a local news reporter. "Anyone who could hurt her is a monster." "Emma teaches my kids about kindness and courage every day," Janet Riley added. "She's made our neighborhood a better place." "We should have protected her sooner," Mr. Chin said quietly. "We let fear keep us silent and a child paid the price." The neighborhood began organizing. They formed a new HOA board with Mrs. Patterson as president. They created a community support network for families with special needs. They even started a fund to help families who'd been financially harmed by Karen's violations. But they also did something else. They made Emma the honorary neighborhood ambassador, a position created specifically to celebrate her courage and resilience. What does an ambassador do? Emma asked me when Mrs. Patterson explained the position. Ambassadors help people understand each other, I explained. They bring communities together. Like how Buddy helps me navigate? Exactly like that. Emma's smile was the first genuine one I'd seen since the incident. I think I'd like that job. The appointment ceremony was held in Mrs. Patterson's backyard, with the entire neighborhood in attendance. Emma wore her favorite blue dress and stood proudly next to Buddy as Mrs. Patterson read the proclamation. Emma Stevens is hereby appointed as the official neighborhood ambassador, in recognition of her courage, kindness, and ability to bring people together through understanding and compassion. The applause was thunderous, but what meant the most to Emma were the individual conversations she had with neighbors who'd been too shy to approach her before. Emma, I'm sorry I never talked to you before, said 10-year-old Marcus Johnson. I didn't know what to say about your eyes. That's okay, Emma replied with typical grace. A lot of people don't know what to say. Do you want to ask me questions about being blind? Is it scary? Sometimes. But Buddy helps me and I've learned how to do lots of things without seeing. Want me to show you how Braille works? As the court date approached, Karen's situation continued to deteriorate. Her real estate business was failing as clients learned about the charges. Local news stations were covering the story extensively, and the public reaction was overwhelmingly negative. Her husband was facing pressure at work as protesters appeared outside his office building. Even their own family members began distancing themselves from her behavior. I tried to warn people about Karen years ago, her brother David told me during an unexpected visit. She's always been cruel to anyone she saw as different or vulnerable. David had flown in from California when he saw the news coverage. He was a software executive who'd become wealthy enough to retire early, but he'd remained haunted by his sister's treatment of his own family. Why didn't you speak up publicly? Family loyalty, I guess. But when I saw what she did to your daughter... He shook his head. I have a special needs son myself. Karen made his life hell during family gatherings until I finally cut contact. What did she do? Called him names, complained about his behaviors, suggested he should be institutionalized. She honestly believes that people with disabilities don't deserve to be part of regular society. David's son, Michael, was autistic and had faced similar discrimination throughout his life. David had become an advocate for autism awareness and had donated millions to research and support organizations. She told my son he was defective and shouldn't be allowed around normal children, David continued. That was 8 years ago and it was the last time I spoke to her until today. David's testimony would be crucial to establishing Karen's pattern of discrimination. But more importantly, it helped me understand that Emma wasn't Karen's first victim. She was just the first one whose father had the power to fight back. I'm going to testify against her, David said firmly. I should have done it years ago. It's not too late to do the right thing. I hope Emma can forgive me for not speaking up sooner. Emma forgives everyone, I said. It's one of her gifts. The trial was set to begin in 2 weeks, but Karen's lawyer was making increasingly desperate attempts to negotiate a plea deal. The evidence was overwhelming, public opinion was toxic, and Karen's own documented hatred was impossible to defend. She's willing to accept a felony conviction, the lawyer told D.A. Williams. 2 years in prison, supervised probation, and mandatory counseling. 5 years minimum, Williams countered. She terrorized a disabled child and tried to destroy multiple families. That's not realistic. Then we'll see you in court. Meanwhile, Emma was slowly regaining her confidence. The neighborhood kids had rallied around her, asking to learn Braille and about service dogs. She was becoming a teacher as well as a survivor. Emma, you're so brave, 8-year-old Sophie Chin told her one afternoon. I want to be like you when I grow up. You already are like me, Emma replied with a gentle smile. You're kind and you care about other people. That's what matters. Sophie had become Emma's closest friend in the neighborhood, learning basic Braille and even practicing walking with her eyes closed to better understand Emma's experience. Watching Emma help other children understand disability and difference filled me with pride and hope. She was transforming her trauma into teaching moments, her pain into purpose. But the best moment came when Emma made an unexpected request. Daddy, I want to go to court. Sweetheart, you don't have to. I want to tell the judge what happened. I want to make sure Karen can't hurt other kids. The courage of my 8-year-old daughter took my breath away. She was willing to face her attacker in court to protect other children from the same treatment. Are you sure? Yes. Mrs. Patterson says being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared. I'm scared, but I want to do the right thing. We spent the next week preparing Emma for her testimony, with child psychologists and victim advocates helping her understand what to expect. Despite the careful preparation, I was terrified about how the experience might affect her. On the day of Emma's testimony, the courtroom was packed. Neighbors, disability advocates, reporters, and law enforcement officers filled every seat. Karen sat at the defendant's table, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Her expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that she'd lost weight and aged years in the past few months. Emma walked to the witness stand with Buddy at her side, her white cane tapping confidently on the polished floor. She wore her favorite blue dress and had insisted on braiding her own hair that morning, wanting to look professional for the judge. Can you tell us what happened on the morning of March 15th? D.A. Williams asked gently. Emma's voice was clear and strong as she recounted the incident. She spoke about her fear, her confusion, her physical pain when Karen grabbed her. But she also spoke about something else, the months of harassment that had preceded the assault. She used to drive by our house really slow, Emma said. I could hear her car. Buddy would get nervous when she was watching us. Did the defendant ever speak to you before that morning? Yes. She told me I wasn't supposed to be on the sidewalk. She said kids like me should stay inside. Kids like you. Broken kids. That's what she called me. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of muffled sobs from the gallery. Karen's lawyer was staring at his hands, realizing that his client's own words were condemning her. How did that make you feel? Williams asked. Sad. And confused. I didn't understand what was broken about me. I can't see, but I can do lots of things. Like what? Emma's face lit up, and for a moment she forgot where she was. I can read Braille really fast. I can play piano. I can bake cookies with Daddy. I can teach other kids about how Buddy helps me. I can navigate our whole neighborhood by myself. I can do lots of things. You certainly can, Williams said with a smile. Is there anything else you'd like to tell the court? Emma was quiet for a moment, her small hands folded in her lap. When she spoke, her words carried a wisdom far beyond her years. I think Karen is scared, she said finally. I think she's scared of people who are different, and that made her mean. But being different isn't bad, it's just different. I hope she can learn that someday. Even after everything Karen had done to her, Emma was still hoping for her tormentor's redemption. The profound grace of that moment left the entire courtroom in tears. Karen's lawyer immediately requested a recess. Within an hour they'd agreed to a plea deal: 4 years in prison, 3 years supervised probation, mandatory psychiatric counseling, and a $50,000 fine paid to disability advocacy organizations. But the real victory wasn't the legal outcome. It was watching Emma walk out of that courtroom with her head held high, knowing she'd faced her fears and protected other children. I'm proud of you, sweetheart, I told her as we left the courthouse. I was scared, but Buddy helped me be brave. You helped yourself be brave. Buddy just reminded you that you're not alone. I'm never alone, Emma said with certainty. I have you and Buddy and Mrs. Patterson and all our neighbors. Karen was alone. That's why she was so mean. Out of the mouths of babes came wisdom that adults spend lifetimes learning. Emma had not only survived Karen's cruelty, she'd understood it, transcended it, and transformed it into compassion. 6 months later, our neighborhood was unrecognizable. The new HOA board had eliminated all of Karen's petty rules and replaced them with community-building initiatives. Families felt safe to express their individuality. Children of all abilities played together regularly in the common areas that had once been forbidden territory. Emma had become the heart of our community, organizing monthly story times where she read Braille books aloud while other children followed along in print versions. She taught weekly Braille classes for interested neighbors and helped new families feel welcome with personalized tours of the neighborhood. The neighborhood had also established the Emma Stevens Inclusion Award, given annually to community members who worked to make the area more welcoming for people with disabilities. The first recipient was Mrs. Patterson, who had learned sign language to communicate with a new deaf family that moved in. This award represents everything our community should be, Mrs. Patterson said during the ceremony. Welcoming, inclusive, and always willing to learn from each other. But perhaps the most meaningful change was in the children. Kids who had once stared at Emma with curiosity or fear now saw her as a friend and teacher. They asked thoughtful questions about blindness, learned about service dogs, and developed a natural understanding of disability that would serve them throughout their lives. And every night, as I tucked Emma into bed with Buddy curled at her feet, I marveled at the strength and grace of my remarkable daughter. "Daddy," she said one evening, "do you think Karen learned to be nicer?" "I hope so, sweetheart." "Why?" "Because I still pray for her sometimes. Mommy always said we should pray for people who hurt us, so they can find happiness instead of being angry all the time." In that moment, I realized that my 8-year-old daughter possessed a wisdom and compassion that most adults never achieve. She'd faced discrimination and assault, yet still found room in her heart for forgiveness and hope. Karen Morrison had set out to destroy my daughter's spirit, to drive our family from the neighborhood and eliminate what she saw as an undesirable element. Instead, she'd revealed the extraordinary strength of a child who refused to let hatred win. Emma didn't just survive Karen's cruelty, she transformed it into love, understanding, and community healing. She showed an entire neighborhood that differences should be celebrated, not feared. 3 years later, Emma started a nonprofit organization called Buddy's Brigade, training service dogs for disabled children and educating communities about disability rights and inclusion. She was 10 years old when she gave her first speech to the state legislature about anti-discrimination laws. "Every child deserves to feel safe in their own neighborhood," she told the lawmakers. "Every child deserves to be seen for who they are, not what they can't do." The legislation she helped inspire became known as Emma's Law, providing stronger protections for disabled individuals facing housing discrimination and establishing education programs in schools and communities. Karen Morrison never returned to our county after her release from prison. Her real estate license was revoked, her marriage ended in divorce, and she moved across the country to start over. But every year on Emma's birthday, an anonymous donation appears in Buddy's Brigade's account, exactly matching the amount of the fine Karen paid years ago. Some people do learn to be better, even if it takes a blind child to show them how to see. That's my Emma. My hero. My teacher. My daughter. The girl who taught an entire neighborhood that being different isn't a disability, it's a gift. And sometimes, it takes a blind child to help the rest of us see clearly.